Good evening, everyone. We will call the public speak out to order. And tonight we have Catherine Mastronardi. She is the president of the Springfield Federation of Paraprofessionals. Catherine?
Thank you, Mayor Sarno. Good evening, members of the school committee and Superintendent Warwick. I'm going to try to stick with what I wrote here, so we'll see how it works. I want to thank all of you, first of all. You've made a lot of thoughtful and thorough decisions during the pandemic, and I feel, and I know a lot of other people feel, that we are very fortunate to have elected leaders and departmental leaders who have remained committed to the common good. The petition I'm presenting tonight is a reflection of the work done in the Springfield community and puts in writing the principles and policy used not only by the Springfield School Committee, but the Springfield community as a whole. As you may or may not know, the Springfield Federation of Paraprofessionals are a member of the American Federation of Teachers, and the AFT Massachusetts was inspired by the work that was being done in the city of Springfield, and they used the work that was done here to develop a Bill of Rights. So I'm going to present the Bill of Rights to you, and it's called Teaching and Learning During the COVID-19 Pandemic, a Bill of Rights for Springfield Students, Families, Educators, and School Staff. And it is sponsored by AFSCME Local 3556, Jobs with Justice, the Springfield Administrators Association, the Springfield Education Association, the Springfield Federation of Paraprofessionals, Springfield No One Leaves, UFCW Local 1459, and the Western Mass Area Labor Federation. The 2020-21 school year is a school year like no other. The COVID-19 pandemic has created unprecedented challenges for students, families, educators, and school staff alike. We understand that inconsistent COVID-related guidance and frequent moving of the goalpost around in-person versus remote learning has caused many challenges. Despite these challenges, we could not be prouder that the Springfield School Committee and the district leaders have remained committed to seeing that all students, families, educators, and school staff have safe, effective, and fulfilling schooling experiences through thoughtful and informed decision-making. This Bill of Rights outlines 10 principles that we believe have guided Springfield's school-related policies and decisions, and is designed to unite stakeholders around shared values, bringing us together in a spirit of collaboration at a time when it is easy to become divided. We believe in the constructive engagement methodology employed by the Springfield School Committee. To encourage others to espouse this approach, we request that the Springfield School Committee adopt this Bill of Rights, which outlines the precepts on which they have based their decisions and reaffirms their leadership role throughout the Commonwealth during the pandemic. Now, so I'm going to read what the 10 different, and originally I was going to add a little bit something about what I think you've done because of this, but I think it's pretty self-explanatory, so I'll just run through them. So a meaningful voice in school-related plans and decisions that are based on the best available science and educational evidence, schools that make health and safety the #1 priority, schools that provide an emotionally safe, affirming, and joyful learning experience, schools where educators' expertise is trusted and respected, schools that provide the tools and trainings to be successful, schools with reasonable class sizes and student caseloads that enable individualized support, schools value and promote equity, schools that are committed to continuous improving of remote learning and hybrid learning practices, and a school social safety net that supports the basic needs of all Mass residents. So I could go through every one of those, who's done what, how we've already lived up to all of these things. But I'm going to say that once again, Springfield has shown that things get tough, we work together and make a difference. And I see that over the city. You can't pick paper without reading about somebody in Springfield helping somebody else out. And I think unless you know some of the behind the scenes things, you don't realize all the work that's going on to support our students in the Springfield and just to support the whole Springfield community. So I really want to thank you all for everything that you've done. And we want you to know that we know whatever decision you make regarding our learning environment going forward, we trust in you because you have already demonstrated your value as public servants. So I'd like to thank you for your time and consideration. I will email you the entire document, and that's it. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Kathy.
And thank you,
very much,
Ken. You guys are doing a great job. Yay!
Thank you, Kathy.
Kathy,
Thank
things
you.
were a lot more simple 10 years, 60 years ago when we could walk up to the corner to the tree stand at your family's property and go get our Christmas tree.
Oh, I love those days too. I spent a lot of time there as a kid. Of course, we were in the house because my grandma was baking us cookies and everybody else was outside selling us trees, but she didn't want us to get cold.
Thank you, Kathy, for that heartfelt statement.
Yeah,
I believe that's the only public speaker we have tonight.
It is.
it is, yeah.
So with that concluded of remarks, we will adjourn until our regular scheduled meeting, public meeting at 6:30.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care.
Good evening. I'll call the meeting to order, and I want to thank again Focus Springfield, Brendan. Thank you very much to be able to continue to publicize this meeting to our viewing public. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Hurst,
Present.
Attorney Murphy,
He was on public speak for that. Fire. He must be trying.
Attorney Murphy,
He must be trying to connect.
Let's move on with the roll call. If he comes in, we'll mark him in when he comes in.
He was there for public speak out.
Ms. Naylor,
Present.
Ms. Gresham,
Present.
Ms. Perez,
Present.
Mr. Collins,
Here,
Mayor Sarno.
Present.
Attorney Murphy is trying to log in at this point. Okay.
Okay, can we all please rise for a moment of silence, and then we'll do a pledge of allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much.
I'm still having trouble getting in.
And again, I know Attorney Murphy is trying to get back
Just to
in. He
make
was
sure
there for
that
public
those
speak
in the
out.
phone use just the verbal without.
So give us 1 second. I also want to thank my or our Dr. Anthony Fauci, Health and Human Services Commissioner Helen Carlton Harris, who is also on, as we work very closely with her on the school side, not only the city side, school side, on this proposed vote that we
Did you
have
shut out
pertaining
the other
to
one?
winter sports recommendation. So again, we're just waiting to see if Attorney Murphy can get back on.
Yeah, all right, go ahead. I'll stay aside.
Okay, okay. All right, we'll go to approval of the minutes to approve October 29th, 2020 and November 12th, 2020 regular session minutes. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, is there a motion on the floor to accept?
So moved.
Motion by Vice Chair Collins, a second, please.
Second.
Second by Ms. Perez. Roll call vote is required with Zoom meetings. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
I'm going to put you on speaker so you can vote, okay?
Mr. Collins, if you want to tell Attorney Murphy, I'm going to email him the link right now once again.
Okay,
Pete,
Pete, they're emailing you the link again.
thanks, Brenda.
Right now, you can,
The host has another meeting in progress, test computer audio.
right, he's sending you a new link, so look at your, but you can vote this way. I'm keeping you on speaker, you're on speaker, okay?
Okay, yeah,
Ms. Hurst,
yeah, yeah.
I'm going to abstain. I was absent for that meeting.
Attorney Murphy,
Yes,
Yes,
Ms. Naylor,
Yes.
Ms. Gresham,
Yes.
Ms. Perez,
Yes.
Mr. Collins,
yes,
Mayor Sarno.
Yes, vote is sufficient vote, that matter passes. We'll now move to voting items. This is to approve the winter sports recommendation. And again, Commissioner Helen Faulkner Harris is on. I know AD, Athletic Director Dwayne Early is also on, and I'm sure there's Clancy and others are on. Superintendent Warwick, please.
Yeah, we have our team on here, and Lydia and Dwayne are going to present, but I just wanted to take a minute to thank Helen Carlton Harris because she's really been part of our team all the way with Jeannie Clancy. So they're here too to answer any questions. But Lydia and Dwayne, we're going to present a report on our winter sports recommendations. They've been working closely with Public Health and our nursing division to come forward, and MIAA to come forward with recommendations for you. So I'll turn it over to Assistant Superintendent Martinez and Dwayne Early.
Thank you, Lydia.
No, I think I'm on.
Thank you, Superintendent. Thank you, everyone. Patty, will you share the PowerPoint now, please? So we're going to start with just giving you an update. We're first going to start with the actual data that's happening in the city because as the superintendent said, Commissioner Helen Colton Harris, along with Jeannie Clancy, have been very instrumental in everything that we've been doing and the decisions that we've been making through the guidance and the recommendations that we are bringing to you this evening. Next slide. So Commissioner, if you'd like to go over the data. So this data comes from our commissioner. And so as you can see, this is from the city of Springfield confirmed COVID cases for the weeks of November 29th through December 2nd. And we wanted to just kind of show you what the trend is looking like, and then also show you the data as to what's happening to the age group that we're going to be making recommendations for this evening. So you can see it was 104 on Sunday, then it jumped up to 160. It went down on Tuesday, the 1st, to 45, and then it jumped back up on Wednesday, December 2nd, to 137. And that's everybody that's tested positive in the city of Springfield. Correct, Commissioner?
60 something. Mr. Carlton Harris? No, I don't know if Helen. I know she's on.
Sorry, my computer, as you might imagine, went down. Yes, thank you very much. What we wanted to show was just the prevalence of the virus and the age group that we're, can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfectly.
What we wanted to show was just the prevalence in the virus in the age group that we are speaking of. Again, I think it's important to acknowledge the team that you have in the school department. We've worked together and it's just been a great partnership. So this is only for this week, and we're simply showing you where we are as far as this week is concerned in the age group. And if you have any questions, we're happy to answer that as well. Is there another slide?
Next slide. Yes.
Did I miss that one?
Next slide.
Yeah, so I wanted to just simply show what we were looking at for these last 3 days as far as the age group is concerned, and the 0 to 10. And so the group that we're really talking about is the 11 to 20-year-old age group, and there have been 61 cases. So we just wanted to give you a little flavor for the data as the Assistant Superintendent and Mr. Early and Jeannie Clancy go through the rest of the slides. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Next slide. So MIAA finally did give some guidelines for the winter sports. And what MIAA actually said was that sports could occur on the date that they were originally scheduled to occur in December. However, the Pioneer Valley Interscholastic Athletic Committee voted to postpone the winter sports for our region until January 4th, with January 4th being the first day that we would have practices and tryouts, and then the first game being January 14th. And so AD Early is going to go over the rest of the what we're recommending and why, but we wanted to let the committee know that because this is your decision, we wanted to kind of bring you up to speed on everything that's also going on around us. And so it's important to let you know that the recommendations that we're going to make today is for students to play just with Springfield within Springfield. So there will be no outside city. Students playing with our students. And again, we're basing our recommendation on also providing testing for our students that will begin before the tryouts and practices, during the season, and then at the end of the season. And we also wanted the committee to know that based on our recommendations, we would also be ready, like we were in the fall sports, to make any adjustments that we needed to based on what's happening with our city and our children and our adults, our coaches and our athletic trainers. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Early to kind of go over everything else and for the recommendation. Mr. Early?
Thank you, Assistant Superintendent, and good evening, everyone. Again, as Lydia alluded to, we have received some guidance and from the MIAA and also from the EEE, the committee. And what we're going to go over tonight is some of the modifications and protocols that we're going to put in place with the hopes of returning our students to some sort of competitive play this winter season. Next slide. So we have in Springfield offered winter sports. We have wrestling, indoor track, and also basketball. Wrestling has already been postponed to the spring season, so there's no required decision on that sport just yet. And also indoor track was also canceled for the winter season, but moved to fall season 2, or the 4th season as we call it this year. So there's no decision required on that sport as well. So the sports that we are presenting tonight would be first off swimming. And swimming has been, the modifications have been released, and the guidelines that we have received will be followed. Practices will occur in pods of 10. There won't be any no cross pod interactions will happen. So it's going to be kind of similar to what you saw in the fall with football, where kids will be grouped in groups of 10, and there will be no crossing over in the swimming pool. The competitions, they will be held virtually. They will compete with schools that are outside of Springfield. However, they will never leave their home pool site, and a visiting team will never ever come to their pool, because we can actually compete with swimming and do it virtually. The swimmers will be required to wear masks when they are not in the pool. When they are in the pool, they will have sandwich bags that they will keep their mask in and take it off right before the start of the race, as they jump into the pool. And then when they do return to the starting blocks and get out of the pool, that mask will be right there, and they will put that mask back on. There will be designated mask break areas within the pool, so students will be able to remove their mask for a short time and take a mask break. Locker room and bathroom protocols will be established by our trainers in the city, as well as working closely with Jeannie Clancy, the Director of Nursing. All trainers, coaches, and athletes, we plan on educating them of all the protocols and guidelines before we begin the season on January 4th. And with swimming, because we will be doing it virtually, there will be no transportation required. So I do, myself, Lydia, and the team have recommended that we participate in swimming. Next slide. Next slide is, as I spoke to earlier, was basketball, which the second sport that we will be presenting to you tonight. All guidelines and modifications, of course, will be followed as we did in the fall. We followed closely all protocols that were put in place and modifications that were released by the MIAA. With basketball, it's normally a 20-game season. However, we will cut that season and modify the schedule down to a 10 to 12-game season. There will be no in-season tournaments or championship play at the end of the season. So the Western Mass Championship, as you know it, and the state championship tournament, as you know it, will not occur this year. Again, like swimming and like football and soccer that you heard in the fall, students will be grouped in pods of 10. They will practice in pods of 10. The coaches will be assigned to a pod of 10, and they will not interact with the other pod of 10, something similar to what you heard in the fall when we presented. And again, proper training will be provided to all trainers, coaches, and athletes prior to the season beginning. Like I said, on January 4th, we will have a citywide meeting with all the coaches and trainers and educate them along with Jeannie Clancy, the Director of Nursing. And the athletes will also be trained individually with the trainers. The gyms, there's some modifications that the MIA put down with the gyms. There has to be designated mask areas in the gym so that students can come off of the court and when they're breathing a little bit heavy and be able to take the mask off for a little bit and catch their breath and then return to the bench area. The bench areas will be separated. The students will be 6 feet apart. In Springfield, we're very fortunate that our gyms have pretty decent size and capacity. So the fact that there'll be no spectators, we can use the bleachers and the seating to actually as benches to spread the students out. So we can keep the students a pretty safe distance apart at the very least 6 feet. The basketballs will also need to be sanitized. So we'll have to make sure that there are a suitable number of basketballs in the gym so that they can be switched out in between each period and also be sanitized. So there will be basketballs obviously provided every year, but this year we will provide some additional equipment so that all the protocols can be followed. Transportation for basketball also, because we're going to modify the schedule as Lydia alluded to earlier. They will be playing against students inside of Springfield SPS schools and Springfield-based teams, so they do not need to have transportation to and from those gym sites or practice. As I alluded to earlier, with swimming, myself, the team, Lydia, and the commissioner have recommended that we participate in basketball this winter.
A.D. Early, I just a couple of questions on hoop. Are they going to be able? I mean, there's a lot of body contact, whether boxing out or deep, defensive aspects. Is that modified at all, or they're going to be allowed to, allowed to play, or is there modifications on the court?
Mayor Sana, how you doing? Yes, so there are modifications to try to eliminate as much contact as possible. For instance, at the jump ball, instead of having a traditional jump ball which student athletes line up at center court, it would be just a coin flip, and then after that would be alternate possession. When it comes to free throw shooting, if it's a 2-shot foul, students wouldn't be allowed to enter the lane until after the first shot. If it's a 3-shot foul, they wouldn't be allowed to enter the lane until after the second shot. Officials will be required to stand 6 feet away from the student athletes when giving them the ball to inbound. Also, the closely guarded rule, the 5-second closely guarded rule will be in place and be highly monitored so that kids aren't within a certain distance of each other more than 5 seconds at a time. So those are some of the modifications that were brought down to try to eliminate as much incidental contact as we possibly can. And also, Mayor Sarno, the kids will be allowed, will have to wear masks the entire time. And like I said earlier, there will be a area for when they come off to take the mask off. When they check into games, there will only be one student allowed at the scores table at a time to check into a game. Once the horn is blown, then multiple students can enter, but you won't see the traditional multiple number of kids sitting at the scores table waiting to go in, again, to try to eliminate some contact. In between quarters, it'll be a minute and a half instead of the traditional minute, so that we'll be have the extra 30 seconds to sanitize things and kids get a little bit extra time to catch their breath. Also, no locker room use because there will be no halftime. They've eliminated halftime so that that students don't gather closely and do strategic things at halftime. So they've eliminated that. So those are some of the things that we've put in place, and the MIA has put in place to try to eliminate as much incidental contact as possible.
Thank you for the clarification, A.D.
No problem.
Is there any questions, any other questions or comments from school committee members, please?
I have a question, sir.
Taylor?
So my question is, I did see something about having the students tested at least 3 times or something like that. Can you clarify what that will look like? And is that something that we're going to provide as we did recently? Or is that something that we're expecting for folks to do on their own?
We are, thank you very much, School Committee Woman Naylor. We appreciate your question. We will put the protocols in place as we did with the fall sports, or was that winter? I'm confused now, but we will put the same protocols in place. We are going to request that all students who want to play be tested prior to. Somewhere mid-season, we will check to make sure that everyone is still COVID-free. And the final test has to do with potentially if our students are back in school, we just want to make sure that those students who have played are going into the classrooms COVID-free. Should we still be remote, perhaps a different decision can be made, but our thought is that potentially we would be back in the classroom in some hybrid way, and we just want to make sure those students are still COVID-free.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other questions or comments pertaining to the winter sports?
If I might,
Attorney Murphy?
for a moment. First of all, I just want to thank Ms. Colton-Harris and Mr. Early and Ms. Martinez and Nurse Clancy for the work that they're doing to try to keep our kids active and back in sports. It's an incredibly challenging time. I mean, even in the best of times, it's hard. So I think it's important to keep our children active. And I was wondering, when we did the protocols in the fall, we did have one, I believe, one positive test. Is that correct?
That's what started the pause that we had to take, Attorney Murphy.
Right. So of the 3 sports that we had in the fall, we had football practice, we had cross country, and we had soccer. And we had one positive test, it looks like.
We had one positive test while the games were in session. And then when we paused and before we came back, and we tested all our athletes, we ended up with 4 student cases at that time.
Okay. And so we feel confident that moving forward, particularly with basketball, it seems like a sport that there is a lot of close contact. We do feel confident that the children will be, our young people will be safe participating in basketball.
That's why we're putting all the protocols and all the education, and we added that we're not just training the trainers and the coaches, but we're doing education. Jeannie and her staff are going to be doing education with the students and with all the trainers and with all the coaches to eliminate some of that. So yeah, we feel confident that with the protocols and the pieces that we're putting in place, the children will be able to participate safely. And again, that's why we're going to have the testing. If anything goes awry in any way, shape, we'll be ready to do like we did with the fall sports and pause them and then come back and reevaluate.
So if I could just follow through on that for one moment. If for example, someone tests positive on a basketball team, one of our basketball teams, which are great, we have great basketball, as you guys know. Would swimming get shut down, or the other sports get shut down, or how is that going to work going forward?
We would just be, so from a scientific perspective, you know that swimming, chlorine is in that water. And I think we all know that chlorine is one of the agents that kills viruses. So swimming would not be shut down if someone on the basketball team tested positive. But your question around if someone on the basketball team tested positive, what would our actions be at that point? And so our actions would need to be that we would have to pause, because we would then need to go through the contact tracing process, which everyone on that team would be potentially a contact. And we would need to test and potentially quarantine.
And just one, if I could, just one last question. Thank you very much, Ms. Galton Harris. The track, indoor track, has been postponed or to the 4th session. Is that
Yes,
right?
yes, Attorney Murphy, and indoor track has been moved for right now to the fall season 2, which will take place in March and April.
Okay, so we will have a track season and wrestling season, hopefully, but it's going to take place in the spring, right?
Yes, and wrestling has been moved to spring.
And why track? It doesn't seem that there's that much contact, in track. I mean, why is it that got moved to the spring, if you know?
Yes, I can answer that question for you. Good question. Because indoor track takes place at Smith College, and because it takes place at Smith College, that's the only indoor facility we can use. The college won't let us access it.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Early. Appreciate it. Thank you for this very much.
No problem. Thank you, Attorney.
Sir?
Sure, thank you. And perhaps the commissioner can answer this question. So winter is not going to start until January 14th. Would that change if, based on our city's designation, like for example, if we continue to be in red, would that affect whether or not we would commence on the 14th?
The data that would impact that would be, because we are currently red, we are currently in a surge. And so we know that's where we are as a municipality right now. The only thing that would impact that is if when we test our students prior to the sport, we had a significant amount that came back positive, then we would absolutely need to reevaluate this strategy. But other than that, I mean, I think the testing midway, beginning and end should suffice as far as hopefully keeping our students COVID-free.
Okay. And then AD Early, how often I know we're shortening the season, but how often are they going to play and practice? Like, is it going to be every single day? Are they going to do it every other day? What does that look like?
So how you doing, Ms. Hurst? So we'll do about a 10 to 12 game season, depending on how many games that will be in each bubble. So they would typically, in a 20 game season, they would typically play at least twice a week. So in a 10 or 12 game season, which is going to be from January 14th to about February 20th, which is about a 6-week period, to get 12 games, and it would probably be about once to twice a week that they would have games, and they would probably practice 2 to 3 times at least per week. But of course, they would be in the following the protocols with the mask, and they would also continue to be grouped in those groups of 10.
You know, I have to say that this was, and I just want to commend Mr. Early and Jeannie and the superintendent, this was not an easy recommendation to come to. I think we all understood that basketball is potentially a high contact sport. And weighing that against being able to get our students active, and some of our students may potentially go to post-secondary on scholarships, I don't know. But we wanted to give students the opportunity using all of our knowledge and protocols and putting it in place. But I want you to know that your team at the school department, including the superintendent, this was not an easy decision, but we believed that it was the right decision when we weighed all the factors and all of the mitigation protocols.
Thank you, Commissioner. It's a balancing act. We're trying for the academics and athletics. That is so, Commissioner Charlton Harris. Important point. We've had a number of scholar athletes that have gone on to collegiate careers and past that, whether it's the D1 or D2, D3, and that parlays opportunity to get into those schools in basketball, football, baseball, on it. So we're trying to take all the precautions. Now, Dwayne, A.D. Early, you're pretty very good ball player in your day. You feel confident in hoop that it wouldn't be, restricted that much where they can be able to play within reason, respecting public health guidelines?
Mayor Sarno, I believe with the guidelines and the modifications that I alluded to a little bit earlier with the jump ball and the distancing on the bench and the requirement of the mask, if we follow those protocols, which of course we will, and keep the guidelines in mind and really pay strict attention to it, I think it would be safe, possible, and of course with the testing that we're going to administer as well, I think it would be safe.
Just looking at the pureness of the game and not being so awkward where it just good, very good.
It's actually with the modifications, modifications with all the other modifications that the MI came out with. I'd have to say the basketball modifications kept it as close to the traditional sport as possible.
Good. Vice Chair Powell, thank you, Adira.
Are we considering a communication with parents to let them know the kind of restrictions that we're putting in place? It actually might, some of the parents might say to their children, look, you shouldn't be going here or there because you're jeopardizing the chance of being exposed. So are we contemplating putting together a communication to parents explaining everything that's going to go on?
Yes. That is going to be part of the education and the training that we put together, an orientation for the parents also.
I might have missed this, AD, earlier, and Assistant Superintendent Martin. Are we in a bubble type thing? Is it going to just be one court, one school, everybody plays there? Or are we going to be going back to?
Yeah, it won't be just one court. It will be. They will play at the high schools. However, there won't be any spectators allowed, and the only essential staff will be there.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments pertaining to the winter sports?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, if I may. It'll just be within the district, right? We won't be outside. Okay.
For basketball, that is correct. And for swimming, we will play others, but it'll be virtually, so nobody will be entering Springfield.
Timing.
Thank you.
I want to, as Vice Chair Collins was just about the article, I want to really thank Superintendent Warwick and the team, A.B. Early, and Assistant Superintendent Martinez, there's Clancy, again, our Dr. Anthony Fauci, Helen Calton Harris, for being able to move forward in what we feel is public health wise safe, and that balancing act, as Attorney Murphy said also about how that obviously the academics are important, but we have a lot of great ball players, male and female, that harness these opportunities to move up into collegiate careers and beyond. So we don't want to hinder that. And so I thank you for the effort, Herculean effort. I know it wasn't easy, and we have a can-do attitude. We'll go from there. But that last point I'll make is what Commissioner Calton Harris indicated. If for some reason, and I knock on wood, there is the testing which we've been doing, it was pretty successful during the fall months, shows a spike, then we'll revert back as a contract tracing, and we'll do what's best on public health. Ms. Hurst?
Yes, I'm sorry, Mayor. This just came to mind when you said something in your comment. A.D. Early, so will boys and girls be in the gyms at the same time? How will we divide up the gym space, or will they alternate?
Good question.
Yes, very good question, Ms. Hurst. So we will design a practice schedule that limits any crossing of teams. We will make sure that we have time in between practices and in between games to properly sanitize the venue. So we'll add additional time in between games, additional time in between practices, so that there is no crossing of teams. Like we said, we're trying to keep them as separated as possible and as safe as possible.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Yes, may I ask a couple additional questions. First one is around the tryouts. Are we going to have tryouts as we've done in the past? And will all students that are trying out then have to have COVID tests in order to try out?
Yes.
Okay. And so that'll be before the games begin.
Right.
So after the 14th of January.
The 4th of January is when the actual practices and the tryouts are going to begin. So the testing will occur before then. We're working on the schedule now.
And the tryouts occur at the first practices before the games. But all those will be tested first.
So
January 4th, it'll all be done.
Can I ask a question, Commissioner Harris? How long does it take for someone who has been in contact with someone with COVID before they show a positive test result?
So usually it's around 3 days. But you know that some individuals never show symptoms at all. And most young people are asymptomatic. And so the symptoms, if you're going to show symptoms, it's usually 3 days after exposure. But again, young people don't show, they're usually asymptomatic. The other thing I would say is to remember that young people are amongst the most resilient, even when they are COVID positive. Those are not the individuals that we're traditionally seeing wind up in hospitals and wind up very ill. And so it manifests itself as an infection, but usually young folks don't get as sick, obviously, as older individuals. I don't want to say definitely none of them, but the trajectory is a lot better for their health.
Okay, thank you. And I asked that question as well because I wanted to make sure that we're out of that window of after New Year's, anybody who might have done something with family, that we would have enough time to make sure that they're not infected. And then also, I guess the last question is kind of related, but not so. So I know there's a flu shot requirement that folks have to have had their flu shots before the first of the year. And I'm assuming that we're verifying that those students will have had their shots also before they are engaging in any sports.
Ms. Clancy, can you answer?
Yes. The part of the sports clearance is up-to-date immunizations. So we will be notifying all the students where they can access free flu vaccine.
Can't hear you well, Jeannie.
Oh, sorry. Yes, the part of the requirement for clearing for sports besides the physical is up-to-date immunizations. So the flu shot will be required. The families will be notified. It's required for school, and we'll help them find access to receiving it.
Wonderful.
Did you want to add anything to that, Ellen?
No, I was going to defer to Jeannie. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen.
And so can I just ask that when you do that memo, AD early, could you also include that as well so that parents are just aware, not just of the COVID requirements, but also the flu shot requirements? And I think that's it. Thank you. I appreciate you answering my question.
Thank you, Mr. Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Perez, please.
Yeah, I have a question about the tryouts. This is for Mr. Early. How many tryouts you gonna have? And how often?
The tryouts will start on January 4th, and traditionally, a coach usually holds about 2 or 3 tryout sessions before they pick their team, because of course they want to give every student athlete equal opportunity to show their talents and what they can contribute.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Perez. Any other questions or comments?
I'm sorry, one more question.
Go ahead.
It's related to their other stuff, right? So students have to have other qualifications in order to try out, such as their grades and stuff like that. Yes. And again, I think that's something, especially for 9th graders, that I don't know how we communicate that. I don't know if it should go in the same memo, but I do think it's something that we want to make sure that if we do vote, that we will have sports, that folks are aware very quickly that their kids need to have their grades and stuff in order to play these sports.
That's a good point, Ms. Taylor. AD Early, can you clarify there is a basic grade point average, and that's good. That's incentive. You're very good, Ms. Taylor. Incentive for the kids to, hey, you want to play ball? There's a Karen here. You're gonna do well in school. Can you clarify that?
Yes, absolutely, Mayor. So the same requirements that would take place during a traditional season are still in place. Students still cannot play with lower than a 1.67, and they also cannot play with more than one F on their report card. The first marking period just recently closed, so those grades will be the grades that we use to determine whether or not a child is eligible. So the same requirements are still in place.
Very good. Any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, this is a vote now. Is there a motion on the floor to move this forward?
I move we accept the recommendation from the committee.
Motion by Vice Chair Collins. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Second by Attorney Murphy. Roll call vote is required. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Hurst,
Yes.
Attorney Murphy,
Yes.
Ms. Naylor,
Yes.
Ms. Gresham,
Yes.
Ms. Perez,
Yes.
Mr. Collins,
Yes.
Mayor Sarno.
Yes, more than sufficient vote. This matter passes. Thank you very much. Helen, thank you very much for being on.
Helen, thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Great job, guys. Thank you very much.
Helped us so much. Thank you, Helen.
Thank you. Okay, we will now move to informational items. This is a staff diversity report. Superintendent Warwick, please.
Thank you, Mayor. The staff diversity report came out of Maria's subcommittee on staff diversity. So I'd like her to tee it up. Maria?
Ms. Perez?
Yes, I just, for point of clarification, I have to say that we did had an advisory group committee meeting back in December, and our second part was in March. And due to COVID-19, we haven't had the meeting with the advisory community group, but we have sufficient information for that group to expedite what we have put together when it comes to having the school committee members involved. I don't know, Lydia has followed with that. And I think having the feeling of what we have put together at this point, I feel confident that we are moving in the right direction. Therefore, tonight there's going to be the presentation, and then Lydia will emphasize the upcoming of what is the next steps that we are going to be taking after tonight's presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Perez. Superintendent Warwick?
Thanks, Maria. So I'm going to turn it over to Matt Grimes and Melissa Shea from our HR department to make the presentation.
Thank you, Attorney Shea. Thank you, Mr. Grimes.
Thank you. Good evening, and thanks for inviting us on what's become an annual tradition in updating our staff demographic data and strategies. So I'm going to share my screen and talk you through our presentation this evening, and I'm happy to take questions with the rest of the team at the end. And so first and foremost, the purpose of our presentation this evening is to give an update on the past strategies that we've shared. As I mentioned, this is not the first time doing this. We want to give an update on some of the strategies we spoke about last year, as well as share some new strategies that were implemented throughout the 2019-2020 school year. And we'll also share the updated staff demographic data as it relates to various reports from the 2019-2020 school year. And so we start with our call to action. In order to sustain an equity-infused model of education, we thought it was important to make sure that this work was really clear in our intentions and why it's important to push forth our agenda to diversify our educator workforce. And so what we are committing to as a school district is to operate from a lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion every day to make sure that we're meaningfully involving people of color and other historically marginalized groups in the decision-making process. So as school committee woman Perez alluded to, we wanted to make sure there was a great representation of our community in those advisory groups. We want to make sure that we're looking at all of our practices from an equity lens. We, of course, embrace and celebrate that diversity here in Springfield and know the profound additional impact that it has on our students. And we are committing to make sure that we see diversity reflected in our leadership and throughout the workforce. And so by the end of today's presentation, we hope that as Ms. Perez said, there's still a lot of work to be done, but we're certainly proud of where we've come over the past several years. And so just to ground us in why this is so important, it's part of our promise, right? Part of our mission. We want to make sure that we're attracting knowledgeable, highly effective, diverse educators who want to work in a high-performing district, because we know, and all the data shows, that when students of color have teachers of color, everybody benefits. So if we look at the research, and this is national research, we know that teacher quality is the key determinant of student success. Increasing teacher diversity is very important for students of color. And as I mentioned, all students benefit when we have students of, or teachers of color and racially diverse teachers in front of our students. We also know, however, that nationally there's a teacher hiring shortage, right? There's a huge dilemma in all of the states, especially here in the Commonwealth, when it comes to not only finding racially diverse educators, but also finding educators to teach in some of our critical needs subject areas, such as special education, English language learning, and STEM. And a recent report by the Economic Policy Institute showed that that teaching shortage could actually reach up to 200,000 by 2025, right? So almost doubling in the next 7 years. So we want to make sure here in Springfield that we're ahead of the curve, and we continue to do everything that we can to ensure that all of our students have teachers that look like them. This slide here just presents a number of reasons of why it's we have a shortage in teacher diversification and a dilemma. And this, again, is national research, and some of the points that are pointed out, there's burnout and frustration. We know here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the Mtel tests are a huge barrier to ensuring that we get the teachers that are best for our students. We understand that there are still salary impacts and a declining number of students enrolling in institutes of higher education. So this is what we really base our strategies on in order to mitigate the shortage that we see. We also base these strategies on nationally recommended best practices. In fact, DESE recently released a guidebook on how to better diversify the educator workforce. And a lot of the strategies that we have been employing over the past few years mirror what those guidelines in the DESE guidebook state. Things such as hiring earlier, creating grow your own programs, providing recruitment stipends for critical needs subject areas. When we use this as a composite comprehensive strategy, that is what has helped in increasing some of our numbers in the past few years. And so what exactly have we done here in Springfield in order to increase our educator diversity? First and foremost is hiring earlier. Over the past few years, we worked to improve our hiring timeline to better determine school allocations earlier so that we can post positions earlier, so we can ensure that we're remaining competitive in trying to find and attract the most highly qualified diverse educators. We've also looked at the overall hiring process and made recommendations at each building level to make sure that we have consistent processes, right? And so even starting with us in recruitment through the application process, screening for qualifications and interviews, we've really standardized these processes to ensure that we're creating equitable and anti-biased hiring practices throughout the entire district. What you'll see throughout the presentation are a number of strategies that are highlighted in green. Anything that you see in green this evening are strategies that were new in the 2019-2020 school year, right? So some of the things that we've been doing for several years, we're implementing a better, more efficient online application system and a new external website. But something that we continue to improve this past school year was updates specifically to a talent acquisition webpage. So if you're someone who's interested in coming to Springfield, you can go right on that talent acquisition webpage and see everything from salaries to reasons why we love the city of Springfield and why we want folks in Springfield to the benefits that we offer here in the district. We're also very active on social media and a number of new job boards that are specifically focused on targeting racially diverse subgroups. Organizations like Teach for America, they have a national website that we post all of our positions on. EdLock is an educator of color specific online job board, as is HBCU Connect. That is the job board that all of the historic Black colleges and universities use to post positions for their students and alumni. We've also pivoted significantly in the wake of COVID-19 to attend a number of job fairs. We attended over a dozen job fairs, both locally and nationally, in the spring of 2020, and we're even able to get out to a few HBCUs in Atlanta before the virus shut everything down. In addition to expanding our online recruitment efforts, we've also created the position that I'm currently served in, but really we're intentional about partnering with these HBCUs and organizations that share the same mission and vision of diversifying the educator workforce. So you'll see on here organizations like Alana, which is our educator of color group with the SCA, NEMNET, which is a National Education Minority Network, the Teacher America School Leader of Color Conference. These are all platforms that we've attended in order to share our jobs and opportunities in Springfield in order to attract more teachers. We've also been intentional about increasing awareness of the different incentives we offer here in Springfield, including funding from DESE, and we'll talk more about that later in the presentation, as well as some grants that we received from the Nellie Mae Foundation. We're also really proud of what we're doing around grow your own strategies, right? We know that we have incredible students here in Springfield, so why not create pathways for them to become educators? And so we're still running strong with our partnership with Westfield State in the Reach to Teach program. We signed a new MOU with DESE and their Inspired Fellows program. That's a program that allows new educators of color to actually network with other educators of color throughout the Commonwealth of Massachusetts in an effort to speak to students and inspire and encourage them to consider a career in education. We also use data from our Springfield Promise Naviance Career Readiness and follow up with any student who has expressed interest in becoming an educator. What's really neat is this Edwin report through DESE that actually allows us to track any student that graduated from Springfield Public School, where they are, if they enrolled in an institute of higher education, and what they're studying. So once again, we can use that report to find folks who are studying education, to reach out to them and encourage them to come back to Springfield to teach. And then in addition to the Grow Your Own programs that we had with our students, we're also continuing to expand opportunities for our community members and our paraprofessionals to enter the teacher pathway. We have a partnership with an organization called Paradigm Shift, which provides mentoring, coaching, and information to any paraprofessional that's interested in becoming an educator. This past school year in 2019-2020, we signed a new MOU with Elms College and their new Center for Equity in Urban Education. And we have about 11 paraprofessionals currently enrolled, who all enrolled in this fall and are on track to become licensed teachers within the next 2 years. We frequently provide paraprofessional informational nights just to get the information out and to talk paraprofessionals through the many steps it takes in order to pursue a career in education here in Springfield. One thing that we started last year was actually providing Mtel reimbursement and vouchers through funding that we received from DESE. We know that these exams can be expensive, and oftentimes educators of color or aspiring educators of color have to take the exam 2 or 3 times. So we're actually able to provide them with a code that will pay for their test so they don't have to pay out of pocket anymore. We also made sure that we capitalized when DESE announced the new emergency license in the wake of COVID-19. We did a lot of targeted outreach to paraprofessionals and teachers who are on waivers to encourage them to apply for that license so that they can get into the classroom, so that they can get the experience and work towards earning that provisional license needed to stay in the classroom. And then just a few of our grow your own strategies. We still have our many partnerships with local institutions, including UMass and our 180 Days program. That's a program that actually allows aspiring educators and master's students to have an entire school year practicum. So they're in the classroom with teachers throughout the entire year, and their responsibilities are gradually released. So by the end of the school year, they're actually taking on the full responsibility of educators. We still partner a lot with the AmeriCorps programs through Springfield College and Literacy Lab tutors to make sure that any folks who are working in our district and working with our students, we're giving them priority and opportunities to work with our students if they so desire. We've partnered with an organization called Call Me Mister, which is a national organization focused on diversifying Black male educators in specific. And then with the assistant superintendent, we sit in on a group called Advocacy for Open Opportunity, which is very much trying to change the barriers around Mtels. We're also leveraging a number of partnerships, including our partnership with the Empowerment Zone, our teacher housing efforts and initiative. We're revamping our partnership with Healing Racism to be able to provide internal training around cultural proficiency. And again, a number of colleges and universities. And then we've also partnered and continue to partner with alternative certification programs such as Teach for America, the New Teacher Project, and Teach Western Mass, which is also an alternative certification program. And we currently have 3 residents from Teach Western Mass working on a number of different buildings. We still provide recruitment stipends for our critical needs subject areas, including ESL, SPED, math, science, and vocational. But we also know that all of our efforts to recruit and attract a more diverse workforce will fall flat if we don't also focus on our retention initiatives. So once we have educators in the district, we want to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to change the conditions, to improve conditions, to make sure that we're keeping them. And so adding more instructional leadership specialists, effective educator coaches, offering more competitive salaries, are our strategies to try to retain our educator workforce once we bring them here to Springfield. And then a few newer retention initiatives. We continue to operate our Springfield Promise Fellows, which is our partnership with AIC, which is our main feeder into school leadership, right? So that's our leadership program in which folks who are currently enrolled in the district in a leadership capacity who are interested in becoming principals and assistant principals can enroll and get that targeted coaching and support. And so just wanted to highlight before we move into some of the actual numbers and data, based on these strategies and the efforts, we were able to minimize the number of teacher vacancies on the start of the first day of school, and we'll go through those numbers in a few moments. We've joined DESE's Diversity Network, which is a national or a statewide initiative to engage in these critical conversations with other districts to see what they're doing to share best practices, all in an attempt to make sure that this is a concerted effort to increase racial representation in schools. In the 2019-2020 school year, we're proud to announce that we secured $150,000 in teacher diversification funding to provide tuition assistance. And currently, as we speak, there are 22 educators in the district, many of whom are paraprofessionals, about 13 who are Springfield Public Schools graduates, who are receiving up to $5,000 in scholarships to go back to school to become licensed certified educators. We've also been working with a consultant and trainer, Dr. Khalees Warnham, on district-wide cultural proficiency training, again, as part of our retention initiatives. And then we also have a new partnership with the SEA and our diary committee, and I'm sure Assistant Superintendent Martinez will speak about this when she shares next steps and strategies. But this is a joint collaborative effort between the SEA, our district administrators, our Alana group, and educators, again, just to brainstorm strategies to continue to make sure that our students have the best and brightest teachers. And so with all of those strategies, we're going to pivot a little bit and talk about the numbers and the data reflected from this past school year, right? So this is a look back. So as of the beginning of November, this is our student demographic data. We like to start with this just to give a better sense, right? Because our goal here is to make sure that our educator workforce reflects the demographics of students. So as you can see in this slide, 67.8% of our students identify as Hispanic or Latinx, 18.6% identify as Black or African American, and about 9% identify as white. So I want you to keep those numbers in mind as we talk through the remaining slides. So starting from the top with our cabinet, what you'll see here is a comparator of the racial demographic makeup of our cabinet from 2011-2012 to this past school year. We used 2011 and 2012 because that is when Superintendent Warwick took the helm as our leader. And so what you'll see here is an increase in the number of diverse individuals, racially diverse individuals on cabinet. compared to 2011, 2012. We'll move into our principals then. And again, you'll see the similar trend. So in 2012, 68% of our principals identified as white compared to 61% this past school year, which means we've seen about a 7% increase in the number of diverse principals, racially diverse Black and Latinx principals in our district. And this data is as of the end of August of this year. Our assistant principals, who are often our feeders into our principals, right? We do pride ourselves in being a career ladder organization. And so as you can see, we increased the number of racially diverse assistant principals last school year as well, from 8% who identified as Hispanic or Latinx in 2012 to 15% this past school year. And for our Black and African American, there's a 5% increase there. And as I mentioned, we often look directly at our assistant principals when filling principal positions, if that fit is there. This slide here, though it hasn't been updated, we like to include just as a comparator, right? So this is the national teacher data. It hasn't been updated since 2017, although we can predict that the numbers probably haven't changed significantly. So nationally, about 80% of teachers in the United States identify as white, compared to about 20% who identify as educators of color. Here in Springfield, last school year, we followed around the national trend, but even between 2018-19 and the 19-20 school year, again, you'll see an increase in the number of both Hispanic and Latinx teachers and the number of Black and African American teachers. This slide here is our Eboom's data report. So each year we have to report our demographic data to DESE, and we do it through this Eboom's report. And this is typically pulled around October this time of the school year. It's important to note here that this does not encapsulate or encompass all of our educators and staff members in Springfield Public Schools. And you'll see in the footnote there, custodians, bus monitors, crossing guards, we do not have to report to DESE. And so we'll share that all staff diversity data in just a few slides. But this includes all of our other staff members. So our Unit A, our Unit D, this is principals, assistant principals, cabinet members, our teachers, paraprofessionals, etc. And again, what you'll see here, particularly compared from last year, in 2019, 68.7% of our staff who we report in the Eboom's report identified as white, and that number has gone down by about 0.6% to 68.1, which means the number of individuals who identify as Black and Latinx has increased. This slide here is a comparison to other gateway urban districts, comparing that Eboom's data that we just looked at the previous slide. So you'll see again here in Massachusetts, 88.9% of the educator workforce across the Commonwealth identifies as white, compared to 68.1% here in Springfield. This slide here shows the number of individuals broken down by racial demographic who enroll in local institutes of higher education. And the purpose of the slide is to show, as all of the data would suggest, that we're seeing a decline in enrollment, particularly of Black and Latinx students in traditional educator prep programs, right? So if these are the programs that we're pulling from, and I'll use Westfield State as an example, whereas almost 96% of students in the educator prep programs at Westfield State identify as white. This is why our Grow Your Own programs are so critical in order to balance those partnerships and relationships. There's a lot of information on this slide, so I'm just going to briefly summarize. These are the Mtel passing rates by subject area and race and ethnicity. So this is information that is reported through DESE. And DESE actually stopped reporting this information for a number of years because the disparities in attainment and passing rate were so dismal, right? So feel free to look into the numbers, but what this is showing is that if we compare our Black and Latinx and other historically disenfranchised aspiring educators to individuals who identify as white who are taking MTELs, there are gross disparities. And we know that the MTEL is a huge barrier in attracting and attaining a more diverse educator workforce. And so we share this just to put some numbers to the information that we say on a daily basis, that we really need some help in figuring out how to mitigate the bias in those tests. This here is our paraprofessional data, and as I mentioned earlier, we're really intentional about providing pathways for paraprofessionals to become full-time teachers if they so desire. And so this is from our, again, this past school year, 39% of paraprofessionals identified as white, 35% as Hispanic or Latinx, and 25% as Black or African American. And so when we are providing funding through our DESE funds and other funds, we're certainly targeting our Black and Latinx paraprofessionals who have expressed interest in becoming educators and supporting them throughout their journeys. Another pool that we often look to locally in terms of diversifying the educator workforce and transitioning this group into teachers are substitutes, right? So over half of our substitutes identify as racially diverse. And if you remember the data that we shared students earlier, about 90% of our students identify as racially diverse. So this is certainly a group that we continue to advocate for, that we continue to encourage considering a career and support if they are interested in becoming full-time teachers. As I mentioned earlier, our Eboom's data didn't capture all of our groups, particularly custodians and bus monitors. So this is our all staff data, which has increased compared to last year. Last year, about 64% of our entire staff identified as white. This year, 63, which means there was an increase in the number of Black and Hispanic employees throughout the entire district. And just a few more slides. This slide here is particularly important. This shows our new hires in Unit A by year. So when I say Unit A, again, those are our teachers, our guidance counselors, our adjustment counselors. And what I really want to highlight here is this past summer, all of the new hires from Unit A, so all of our new teachers, and again, our guidance counselors and our adjustment counselors, almost half, 49.4% of our incoming class of new teachers identified as racially diverse. If we look back to 2012, right, we had 66% of our incoming class of teachers and Unit A members were white, compared to just 50%. That's a huge increase and something we're really proud of. Again, I just want to reiterate that over half of the new teachers that we hired this year identified as Black or Latinx. I also think it's worth mentioning that, of course, like many other aspects of our district, our recruitment efforts were hit hard by the onslaught of COVID-19, right? So where we would typically be visiting local colleges and doing college fairs and a lot of that boots on the ground recruitment, we had to stop and pivot in March, just as many of our other programs did. And so we weren't able to get out to every college as we usually would. We weren't able to attract as many teachers as we wanted to because I had direct conversations and spoke with educators of color who said, yes, I want to come to Springfield, but I'm really concerned because I have an underlying health condition. I was planning on relocating from Boston, but I just don't feel comfortable doing that now. So I truly believe that if COVID-19 did not slightly hinder our progress, those numbers would be even higher. This slide here is our teacher turnover, again, from 2012 compared to this past school year. And what you'll see here is a downward trend. And so this past school year, these are voluntary resignations. So folks who are leaving the district on their own will for whatever reason. Maybe they're leaving the educator workforce, perhaps they're moving to another district, but we're down to about 115. In our retirements, we saw a slight uptick in the number of retirements, but that trend has sort of stayed the same over the past few years. But again, with our resignations down to about 115, and these are voluntary resignations compared to an overwhelming 275, right? So from a recruitment standpoint, having to fill 275 positions is a near impossible task. 115, still a lot of teachers, but we're really proud of that downward trend and hope that it will continue given our number of efforts in terms of recruitment and retention. And then finally, this here is just a breakdown of the racial demographics according to that 115. So if we look at the number of resignations, about 80% of our resignations last year identified as white, and about 20% were Black and Latinx. And so this here shows next steps, but I'm going to invite Assistant Superintendent Martinez if you want to share some of your next steps too. But in terms of just continuing the momentum, we're starting to develop a plan to roll out employee affinity groups. These are groups that will allow educators of color to just have conversations. We're in year 3 of our educator DESE diversity funding, and very proud to announce that we received $250,000 this
Yeah, I just wanted to say to Mr. Grimes, very, very substantial report in the school committee when Maria Perez opened up. We are heading in the right direction in a very challenging field when it comes nationally on that. As you can see under the Superintendent Warwick and administration, that we made significant strides compared to the past. There's still more to be done, but that was Mr. Grimes' very thorough report. It shows the trajectory of that we are moving in the right direction, but how difficult even moving in the right direction is to recruit and inspire teachers of diverse backgrounds to come into systems anywhere across the country. So thank you very much. I don't know if any school committee members had any questions or comments before we move on to the next portion of the presentation. So that was very thorough.
Yes, I do, Mr. Mayor.
Discussion, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Grimes, for that thorough report. So of the 11 paraprofessionals that's enrolled in becoming teachers, what's the breakdown of diversity?
Oh, Ms. Gresham, this is Melissa Shea. I think Matt was having some technical difficulties, but I think what he was saying was that the paraprofessionals are part of our pipeline. And if you go back to the slide that shows that the racial demographics of our paraprofessionals as a whole in Springfield are more diverse, we're targeting the paraprofessionals. So those are the paraprofessionals are the 11. My understanding is they're all diverse, but.
Say that, I'm sorry, repeat that.
Oh, Matt is back.
Sorry,
Matt,
I am back.
The question with regard to the 11 paraprofessionals that are in the program, Ms. Gresham was asking if you have the demographic statistics on the breakdown of those 11.
I can share that all of the 11 individuals enrolled at the Elms College Center for Equity and Urban Education are racially diverse. I don't have the breakdown specifically. They are all non-white, so Black and Latinx. I can certainly get the breakdown between the two subcategories.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Hurst?
Yes, so I would agree. Thank you, Matthew. I thought that was a great presentation. I do have some questions because a lot of it was, there was a lot of data, but I'm wondering, are you also tracking the number, or do you have the data of the number of actual recruits that you're getting from some of those job boards like the HBCU Connect? Do you have those numbers? And then who else is recruiting? Is that just a one-man job? Is that just you?
So in terms of where folks are coming from, we do have a question on our application, so we may be able to pull that data. Where did you hear from us? Whenever I do recruit and speak with folks, I can keep that data. But I think historically we may not have that. And then I truly believe that recruitment is a collective effort across the entire district. Right, so while the application process certainly rests within HR, a lot of recruitment happens at the building levels. when principals see a paraprofessional who's doing great, they encourage them to reach out, and I sit down with them and have those conversations. Teachers are recruiting others. Again, I've gotten recommendations from Ms. Naylor, from Ms. Martinez. And so it's certainly a collective effort that doesn't rest solely in the hands of me or HR, but I would say it's a district-wide effort.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, sir. Any other questions? Ms. Perez?
Maria, you're muted.
You're muted, Maria.
Okay,
I have to say, you always said it. We have every month 1 hour meeting, but I have to also thank the diversity committee, Ms. Naylor and Ms. Hirsch, because we have many subcommittee meetings in trying to put together this development. And I think that we are on the right path, but I will not sit here and not say how many meetings that we had, including planning the advisory community meeting, looking who would to be at the table in order for us to develop the plan that we have developed. So it came about a lot of subcommittee meetings to create this type of development.
Thank you, Ms. Perez.
May I add, Mr. Mayor, to Mrs. Perez, she's absolutely correct in that it is a group effort and it's taken a lot of work on the part of everyone. And I especially want to give kudos to Matthew Grimes because it really is a testament that we did a good, we had a good hire because we know this data did not look like this last year when the proposal came forth to have someone in this role. The expectation is that we would see results, and we're seeing results very quickly. So again, even in spite of COVID, these numbers are really exactly the direction that we would like to see. And just the thoroughness of what you're doing and in spite of those limitations. So I just wanted to acknowledge you and say, you know, thank you for everything that you're doing, everything that Melissa's doing to make sure that we are in fact moving the needle on this, because it is very important to us and to our community and to our children.
Thank you, Ms. Naylor. Yeah, Matt, you're on my city side with Attorney Talia G, much of the same thing, and it is paying dividends. The recruitment, she's out and about there in all different fields, a lot of times police, fire, but all different fields. And I think the African proverb, it takes a village, and so it's a team approach. You hear something on, but you know, the leader there, Matt, what you're doing, what Talia does on my side, and we've seen that in our percentages too with the Chief Diversity Inclusion Officer. So, you know, Maria, school committee woman Maria Perez indicated right from the beginning, progress has been made, and you put it out there now. It is very challenging across the country to get diversity or minority teachers to go into the field. And then when you get him, he or she in the field, to stay in the field. So if we show them that there's a ladder, not only to help our children out, but there's also, if you want to move up, there's a ladder for success for you too. Again, have any other questions or comments that everybody involved with?
Mr. Mayor?
Ms. Perez.
Yes, I also want to thank the team that I had around us. Lydia Martinez, that she's going to be doing some presentation. I think that when we started this conversation, we was clueless where we were going to start, but because of the great team coming from the superintendent that were charged to work around with the subcommittee, I feel that we have come a long way. It's based of the teamwork that we have done through the whole development of this project. So I feel very confident that we are going to be moving towards the right direction. I think this gives us the guidelines where we are, where we need to continue. And I think this will be the footnotes to follow, not only for this particular model, but to continue with the model and see more progress within the model. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Perez. Any other questions or comments before we move to Assistant Superintendent Martinez? Okay, hearing none. Superintendent Ward to Assistant Superintendent Martinez, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Superintendent, and thank you, everyone. It has really been a collaborative effort. And so we are requesting that not at this meeting, but at a very future meeting that we present to you on the entire Dyer committee that has been working so hard and collaboratively. And it includes, members of the school committee. It includes us. It includes the SCA. It includes Alana. And it includes the Pioneer Valley Project. And really making it a whole city effort to really try and change the dynamics in terms of the diversity and the inclusion and that is occurring in the city of Springfield. So we will be requesting to do a formal presentation from the entire committee. And we also want to thank the school committee members that joined us at the last subcommittee meeting. That was very powerful to see you there to just start the work. And for those of you that couldn't make it but were invited, what we did was plan, so you didn't miss much. So we want to bring you up to speed and really continue to move together as one unit, because a lot of work has been done by many folks at different times and for some of the initiatives throughout the years. But to see them all come together now as one is really powerful. And it's something that we've been really documenting so that we can show the power of when a city comes together to work on something, how great it can be. So we want to again, request to do a formal presentation to you as a committee in the near future, and just thank everybody for all your efforts. And I can't say thank you enough to Matthew. He has been doing such great work, and I know that I've invited him to a bunch of different little committees and stuff that we've been working across the state, but it's what we need to do if we're really going to make change, not just in Springfield, because some of the things are really out of our control. And so trying to change things across the state and the nation to really help with this diversity issue it's been very interesting, but we've met a lot of great people who are willing to do the work, and I think we're on to something. So we just want to say thank you, and the work will continue. And hopefully we'll do a formal presentation to you from the entire committee soon. January or February would be great.
Super. Thank you, Superintendent Martinez. Any other questions or comments?
Just want to thank the team. They've done a great job, and thank Maria for her leadership on this. But the team has done a fabulous job, and to recognize Matt for his tremendous work. He's been a great member of our team.
Thank you, Superintendent Ward. Any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, we're going to move to the reports of standing committees. Student relation, parent concerns, Ms. Gresham.
No reports, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Gresham. Buildings and Maintenance Committee, Vice Chair Collins.
No report.
Thank you, Vice Chair Collins. Legislative and Contracts Committee, Ms. Perez.
No report at this time, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Curriculum and Programs Committee, Ms. Hurst. I'm glad to have you back on board.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No report at this time.
Budget and Finance Committee, Mr. Collins.
Just anxiously awaiting the state budget.
We all are. Thank you, Vice Chair Collins. Vocational Education Committee, Attorney Murphy.
No report, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Technology Committee, Ms. Naylor.
No report, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Naylor. School Safety Committee, Ms. Gresham.
No report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. The Special Subcommittee, Staff Demographics, Ms. Perez. That was a great work there. Any other comments at all?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. We'll now move to the report of the Student Representative School Committee. Naz, I know I saw Nazir Jennings was on. I know he's on. He represents students, Springfield Public Day High School. Naz, I don't know if you have anything you wanted to say or report. Thank you for being on too, by the way.
Naz, if you're trying to talk.
You're muted, Naz. Well, Naz, I know you've been on, so I want the viewing public to know that our student representative, Nazir Jennings, from Springfield Public Day High School, has been on this meeting, and Naz, we appreciate that. We'll now move to report of Superintendent. Superintendent Warwick, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, thank you, Naz, for joining us. Just some report on some data. Attendance report came in from school staff, and for the first 3 months, we're at 91.5%. So that's a Herculean job done by the entire staff, in spite of all issues associated with this pandemic, to have the attendance at 91.5%. So that's very, very positive. Another Herculean job done by the staff. Our meal distribution, since we closed down in March, we've distributed 4,579,754 meals to students. So just a great job done by our staff, led by Pat Roach and Tim Gray, and the Sodexo team. Another piece of information that we did receive a letter this week, just a day or two ago, from DESE. And DESE is encouraging districts to return high-needs SPED students to school as soon as possible. So, you know, obviously we're going to have a vote coming up about the return to school. They did take into account that Springfield is in the red and one of the highest in the state relative to the COVID virus, but they're suggesting that we return the kids anyway. I did have a conversation with the associate commissioner and shared that with him, and shared that, you know, our school committee was interested in fixing the ventilation systems and getting all that done before we brought kids into school, especially high needs special ed students that have more pre-existing conditions. And that if we were going to do some phase in with high needs SPED kids, they would be in the first group, but they certainly wouldn't be the only group we bring back in that first tier, because of, I think, the litigation implications also and the safety implications. So we had a conversation. I also talked to the Mass Association of School Superintendents about this, and clearly this is a local decision. So DESE is giving us input on this, but it's a local decision and it rests with the school committee. And I do think we have a phase-in plan when we're ready to return. I think we want to take care of our ventilation systems first, but we'll have a discussion with that at our town hall meeting on the 15th and our vote on the 17th. But I want to be perfectly clear. This is a school committee decision, and by Massachusetts law, it's a local decision. And we have to look at our systems and what's right for our community and make a decision we feel is right for our community. And yeah, he suggested to me that we've done more with ventilation than a lot of other districts, and they got this, and I said, I think more districts should have actually done more with ventilation, given this is an airborne illness, but we're doing our homework and proceeding in the right manner. So we had a healthy discussion, and you know, again, it's a local control issue, and that'll rest with the school committee. But I'm thrilled we were able to pull another town meeting together, because I thought that first town meeting was exceptional to get input from our community. This isn't a Malden decision. This is a Springfield decision. And then we can do the right thing for our kids and our staff and our community when this is over. So we had a healthy give and take discussion on the issue, and I think we understand where one another are coming from. So just wanted to let school committee know that we did get that letter of concern.
Thank you, Superintendent Warwick. Just to let you know also on the meals, we've also partnered at Central High School with the Oasis Food Bank, John Foley, and with DPW and the police and Central Principal Tad Tokars. So we're serving 3,500 families weekly there at Central High School with vegetables and fruits and meats and milk and you name it. So we're doing that. Just to piggyback with Superintendent Warwick, I did have a conversation with Education Commissioner Jeff Riley also to again reiterate with him that we'll respond to the letter that we all have the same goal. We want to get our students, our teacher administration back in once it is publicly held safe and sound, but we have not sat idly on our hands. We moved forward in a very proactive way, investing millions of dollars in proper ventilation, going above and beyond with the COVID-19. And that's what we're going to base our decision on moving forward. We're currently in a spike. We worked very closely with Commissioner Helen Colton Harris. So I told him that we're preparing once it is safe and sound, public health wise, we're getting our buildings all retrofitted and upgraded to be ready to go. But in the meantime, I did indicate, it was a good conversation, that we've been ahead of the curve because of the investments that were made and the foresight of the superintendent school committee to invest millions and millions of dollars in laptops. So we were ahead of the game there. Our attendance rates, 91 to percent. So we all have the same goal. And just because other districts did not decide to pursue to be as thorough as we're going to continue to be, that's their issue, that's their problem. We're going to keep doing what's right for our students and our faculty. So when it's clear and it's safe, we'll be ready to roll with that decision, and we're going to respond to their request in a very professional manner of all the steps we've taken. But that decision, again, will be rendered by us, the school committee here, and working with the public health specialist, Commissioner Helen Carlton, Harris, and others. So same goal, and we're going about it in what we feel is a much more thorough and safe measure.
Yeah, and you know, we've been recognized across the state for the quality of our remote learning plan. We actually presented to a special legislative committee across the state. And I assured them that we're delivering a high quality remote program, and they recognize that, they've reviewed that. They suggested in their letter that they might follow up with an audit of our remote learning plan, and I said, bring it on. We'd love you to audit the plan. It's a great plan. So they've been threatening that around the state too. So, you know, if they want to bring on an audit, bring it on. We're doing a great job. The staff has killed themselves delivering a high quality program. That's been our focus since we made this decision to deliver a high quality program. And we've done that. And we've delivered a very high quality program under Dr. Morris's leadership for our special ed students. Not only all of their services, but all the ancillary services. We have teletherapy. We've continued to deliver speech and language. We've delivered all the special ed services that are in students' IEPs in a high quality manner. And we will continue to do that. And we're committed to doing that. So if they want to do an audit, I told them, come right ahead.
We're not going to play, politics has been played, especially on a national level. We're going to base our decisions on data and public health aspects. And again, we're doing all the precautionary and proactive and retroactive fitting on it. So when it's safe and sound, we're ready to go. But we're not going to get into what happened on a national level on the mishandling and the politics being played on COVID-19, how it was handled here. But we told the commissioner and others, hey, we have the same goal. We're going about it what we feel is in a much thorough way, and that's going to be our direction as we continue. So, turn it back to Vice Chair Tom.
We aren't the only ones receiving this kind of pressure, and while there's a lot I would like to say about DESE putting pressure on committees, I will hold my tongue at the moment. As my mother used to tell us, sometimes discretion is the better part of valor. But what I will say, you know, even given this undue and unrealistic pressure, what I'm really most proud of is this committee. We have committed that we will listen to the experts, we will listen to our health commission, we will listen to the scientists on our air, and we will listen to our community. And for anybody to pressure us to make a decision prior to listening to all those people is unconscionable.
We're not in church, but I would say amen, Chris.
And again, I want to thank Ms. Naylor too on that town hall concept, which again, I'm glad we're able to do that. I have one coming up on the police community relations. It's important to get the input, throw it on, and go from there. But Superintendent, if you have any other questions or comments on Superintendent's report,
Yes, yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to know, Superintendent, how many attendant officers do we have in the district?
Like to Lydia, do you want to take that one? They report to Lydia.
We have a total of 11.
11? Are they divided up to elementary, middle, and high, or?
Yes and no. The high schools have dedicated personnel. The big schools have dedicated personnel. And then the smaller schools and the elementary, we have a team approach with the elementaries.
Plus your parent facilitators.
Okay.
Oh, parent facilitators,
Plus you have the parent
adjustment counselors that you can actually, a lot of people help,
too.
but right.
All right, okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments on the superintendent? This first?
Yes, so Superintendent, I heard you talk about the meals, which we know is really critical for our community. I wondered, have we gotten any clarification or heard back about the concern that was aired by Western Mass News on those meals that were being dumped?
Yeah, we are following all the protocols with USDA, and one of those protocols is agencies serving kids can actually get meals. And we had a church group in Indian Orchard that actually was picking up meals, and they picked up more than they needed a few times. And then they didn't have the proper refrigeration to store them, and they dumped them. But that was not school staff, that was not Sodexo staff, and it was actually people trying to do the right thing because they're running late, kids and everything. But they didn't
Very
refrigerate
good to know.
properly, so they thought they should get rid of them. And we're now monitoring that closely so they're not taking more than they need.
And thank you, Mr. I know that Azelle Kavan and I know Billy Baker, my communications director, stressed that to Western Mass News going, hey, you need to, the way that story is depicted, you need to clarify this. And I don't think that church group was anything out of malice on their heart. They were trying to do the right thing.
Right.
They couldn't store it, so they got rid of it at the time. So there was no ill intent here, no underlying factors, and I believe that Western Mass did clarify.
They did do a clarifying story. Yeah. I just wish.
Oh, that's good to know. I didn't see the clarifying story, but that's good.
Story. Yeah, I saw it.
It was very, very brief.
I will tell you, I wish they did as many stories about the 4,500,000 lunches we've distributed successfully as this, unfortunate agency slight mistake. But they finally did a clarifying story on it. And it was, like I say, no ill intent. People trying to do the right thing in the midst of a pandemic, but to their lack of refrigeration, they couldn't store things properly. Instead of bringing it back to us, they did call, they had dumped it improperly. Well, we took care of that. But thank you for checking in that, because not everyone saw the clarification. Sorry. Yeah.
I didn't see you. I know it did. Ms. Naylor?
I have a couple clarifying questions. The first one is around the attendance, the breakdown of attendance. I know that you said it was 91% approximately. Do you have a breakdown by grade, by school level? Elementary, middle school, and high school?
We have
We do. We have it down to the single students.
We have every school also. Yes.
If we could have that, I would really appreciate that.
What do you want, LaTonya? Just what the average daily attendance is by school?
Particularly by level. I appreciate it by school as well, but definitely just to look at the difference between the elementary, middle school, and high schools.
So the elementaries are always higher, and then the more challenging is the middle school and high school. We've had our biggest improvements at the middle and high school level, but the numbers have never been as good. But we have a breakdown by level in school in our attendance report, and I'll be glad to send it to all of you.
And as a follow-up to that, do we track also the attendance in classes?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, not by classroom, but by student, yes. But I wouldn't be able to tell you, Ms. Naylor, the teacher, 5th grade ELA, we don't have it broken down.
I guess what I'm asking Assistant Superintendent is, for example, our kids coming back after lunch? Like, are we tracking whether or not we're seeing a dip after lunchtime?
Attendance at the secondary level, so they do period attendance as well. And then they're at the elementaries. Of course, they know they don't need that tracking as much, but we do the period attendance at the secondary level.
I'm guessing Bob can say since he turned that.
Hey, Stats, you have something to say?
I just wanted to share that one of the things we're doing this year because of the remote learning is we're actually using our web data. And so we have actually reports we put together. It looks at the web traffic that our students are engaging in on their computers, and actually by student, we can see for every hour of the day if they're on the websites that we're using for teaching and learning. And so we actually have reports we can share with our principals that a report that'll say for yesterday, here's a list of all your kids. Here's who was on at 7 a.m., 8 a.m., 9 a.m., 10 a.m. And you can actually see it when you look at the data. You can see at lunchtime, you see the dip. as students sign out, they get their lunch. You can see it pick right back up in the afternoon.
Okay, thank you.
Latonia, on a normal basis, we would do it by, like the superintendent was saying, we do it by period so that we can track like the periods after lunch and to see the increase or the decline. So, and that is part of the data that we use with the attendance specialist, Mrs. Gresham. So when they know what to follow up and what the attendance teams at the schools kind of look at, that is part of the data that we look at.
All right, thank you.
Hey, stats, I don't have that on my Etch-a-Sketch, you know.
We can try to work on that.
Time, Paul, I'll get that done for you.
Any other questions?
Yes, I have two more questions. One of the questions is, will families still have the option to be able to remain remote, even if we decide to go back hybrid? Is that something that's still going to be available to families?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And the last question is kind of going back to the presentation that we received on diversity. I know that there was a lot of information that was shared about a lot of the challenges outside of our control, such as the limited pool of applicants for teaching positions and whatnot. I also wanted to ask if we can get some information on what exactly are the topics or the information that's being discussed with the proficiency training. And particularly for me, I want to understand more around what principals and those who are hiring in their buildings are being given as cultural proficiency or humility training and practices for onboarding candidates and interviewing folks. So they're not screening people out and they're actually screening people in.
Good question. We do that. So, yeah, good
We
question.
can get you that.
Good questions.
Thank you.
Could I just add to that, if possible? To that end, is it possible also, Superintendent, to see, and I forget what slide it was, it might have been the Grow Your Own, where we talked about, or where it demonstrated our growth in the number of Black and Latinx. Do we know, are those the same people or are those new people being brought in? Do you understand I don't know if and perhaps I'm quoting the wrong slide, but perhaps it might fit to a lot of what was presented. Like, are those the same people or are we losing people and then we're refilling them? I guess I want to know continuity and retention.
Yeah, the retention data was towards the end of the slide. As you can see, we're retaining people much better than we used to. So we're not hiring as many folks every year. But the diversity of the folks we're hiring has improved year by year.
Assistant Superintendent Martinez, is Matt still on Grimes at all? Okay. Or Melissa?
Melissa's still on. And Melissa, do you have anything
Anything
to add
more
to
to
that?
add on that?
Melissa, you're muted.
You're muted. You're muted.
Oh, thank you. Sorry about that. Yeah, so the slides, when you look at them as a whole, should be able to answer that question. But so, for example, if you look at the retention, for example, like this past year that reflected there were 115 folks that voluntarily left the district. But when you looked at, for example, of the actual vacant positions in the district that were hired, about 49.6% of them were diverse candidates compared, so it wasn't you had almost half of the new positions filled with diverse candidates. So with regard to some of the folks, obviously in the data are long-term employees that we've been retaining, but of the new positions that become vacant, almost 50% of them this past year were filled with diverse candidates.
So 80% of the current workforce are Caucasians, but 50% of the new hires are diverse now. So we're making progress as people are leaving, because most of the people that are leaving, are Caucasians. So, and as you could see last year, 80% of people who left were Caucasians. Does that answer your question, Denise?
I understand what Denise is looking for, I think, and without having, because you need to go back and forth between slides to kind of get to what she's looking at. So Patty, can we make sure that this slide presentation gets mailed out to the whole committee so that they can do that? I think it's very hard when it's on a presentation to flip back and forth and to look and see what you can discern out of that. So can we send that out to everybody?
Absolutely.
Definitely.
So it would be great, one, definitely to have that. Thanks, Chris. And I think that it answers my question. I think what I wanted to really understand was whether or not the growth that we were seeing was new growth, or was it sort of flat in that they were the same exact people? Does that make
And I think if you look at the data closely as we have, it's new growth. You know, the diversity relative to hiring in recent years is much better, and that's new growth.
But Ms. Perez and the whole team, if you should share, I mean, it's going, you can see substantially in the right direction compared to, it's nearly a decade now. Yeah, we started. Any other questions or comments on the superintendent's report?
Well, Mayor, could I just say one thing? First of all, I want to thank Ms. Perez for leading this discussion, and it seems to me we have a long way to go in diversifying particularly our teachers. But I was also wondering on the issue of gender, is there a way to determine the folks? Do we have men teachers and female? I mean, can we break it down by gender as well? I'm just wondering that statistic. I mean, I do think it's important to try to attract men of color to work in our school system, and I know there's been a great disparity there. And I just was wondering if we could possibly also get some information on breaking it down to how if we're attracting men of color as well.
We do have that data, so we could certainly provide that to you. And then the other thing too is we also have some programs as well. It was on some of the programs that we've partnered with organizations and actually even just this past year, an organization to attract specifically to your point, Attorney Murphy, with regard to men of color.
But the male-female piece is a national issue as well. You know, I don't know, when some of us started teaching, there were more males in the profession than there are now. This is a national issue also, so it is something we need to continue to work on.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on the superintendent's report? Okay, hearing none, that was a good, very thorough discussion. Thank you on that. Is there any unfinished business? Hearing none, is there any new business?
Yes, I have a question, sir.
Ms. Nails, go ahead, it's okay.
I mean Denise.
I couldn't get to my mute button. I'm a little too slow.
This is like Family Feud. You gotta hit that thing. Mr. Hart, you gotta hit that thing.
So just a quick question. Do we have any etiquette or protocol on remote learning specifically for the families? Because we're getting a lot of complaints about parents in the backgrounds of their kids' screens doing somewhat inappropriate things.
I looked into, you sent me that?
I did.
Detailed that I was going to ask the superintendent to send out to you on the procedures that they're following for that. Yeah, and it's quite well laid out. So my fault we didn't get it out to you in time to answer the question, but I just was reviewing it with the
There's a detailed set of procedures. I sent it to the vice chair because he called with a question. We'll get it out to all of you, but there's a detailed set of procedures. But it's a school-based situation, and we look for the teacher to work on it first, but then administration to get involved and work with the family. And if we have to pull a student into a side room to deal with it, and then get administration involved. But administration has the protocol to follow in each school, because we deal with it just like if we had an issue, you know, with a parent at the school when school was live.
No.
We'll follow through on that. And they work with DCF if there was something inappropriate.
And I want to ask too, if that protocol includes if a parent is the reason why the kid is not able to turn on their computer.
Yeah, if we would follow through our counseling staff with folks that aren't participating. And again, our staff first, the teacher, then the counselor, then administration, then DCF and the courts if we're still having difficulty.
Okay, thank you. Because
Live session.
that's been another complaint too. Some parents saying, I don't want people looking in my house, and they telling their kids to turn the camera off, and the kid's getting in trouble because he's supposed to have the camera on. So I just want to make sure that the young people aren't being penalized for their parents' behavior.
Parents actually sense doing
Yeah, but they can black it out. As they're saying, we need to teach them how to black out. So there's nothing but a black background.
Yeah, but that's a good point, Stella. That's good.
Yep.
Okay.
But administration and staff are working on those issues, and we do have a protocol for it.
Ms. Hurst?
Two questions for the one for the superintendent and then one for, I just as a plug. But superintendent, are our high school guidance counselors doing any sort of virtual office hours? That was a question that was posed to me by a constituent around when are juniors and seniors supposed to have time with their guidance counselors? Do we know if that's happening at the high school level?
I'll certainly follow through with Yolanda Johnson on that, but the counselors are supposed to be following through with the kids, just like they are in regular sessions. And I've seen a lot of work at the counselors, and they've been actually very, very involved at all the levels. High school counselors, Lydia, I see you nodding your head because you're part of that. So Lydia, do you want to add to that?
Yes, they do have office hours. We've been establishing that, and Dr. Johnson has made sure. So maybe we can just get their schedules. It would be in their schedule. If there's a particular school that somebody's looking for, because there are multiple counselors at some of the schools. So, but yes, they do.
No, it was just a general question about how are our juniors and seniors having conversations with their.
Well, they are, and they're also meeting with the FAFSA fellows for college going. So there's a variety of, depending on what they need, there is a variety of different folks in that arena in the college and career that they can set up a Zoom meeting with. And in some cases, they're even texting. So they do have that.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
But if a parent has a particular question at a school, I'd certainly call the principal at the school to set something up.
Sure, thank you. So I just wanted to make a plug in Maria, and I know that the district is using her. I was actually happy to see that in Matt Grimes's report, Dr. Khalees Warnam, and Maria was on the MASC Delegate Assembly a couple weeks back. And Mayor and Chris, as chair and vice chair, I would make the plug that we bring her in for a working session or maybe like a Saturday morning retreat. She also trains or provides professional development to school committee members around equity, and she's really amazing. I don't know if Maria saw her on that Saturday morning, but she really is very good and talks about it from a governing perspective as school committee members. So I would just, make that plug that, I don't know, if we had her brought in for an hour or 2 hours, I really think that she's very well worth it.
Excellent idea, and that certainly we all can use all the training we can get. If every member could send in to either Patty or myself a preferred day and morning or afternoon, we'll try to get it to the majority of time where people are, then we can send an invitation to her. We can find out what's best for everybody first, then we can see if she can meet those, those time frames.
But the staff that has worked with her, Denise, has been raving about the training that she's providing. And we're going to bring that to every school, to every teacher in the district as well. But you're right, she's done a fabulous job. So
yeah, she really is very good.
Thank you. Thank you for that's a good suggestion.
Yeah.
Ms. Hurst, thank you. Is there any more new business? Okay, Steve Harvey says, survey says, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion by Vice Chair Collins. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Gresham. Roll call vote is required. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Hurst,
Yes.
Attorney Murphy?
Yes.
Ms. Naylor?
Yes.
Ms. Gresham?
Yes.
Ms. Perez?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mayor Sarno?
Yes, more than sufficient vote. This matter passes.
Stay well, everybody.
Good evening,
Yeah,
and
stay
thank you
well,
for
everyone.
watching.
Thank
and
you,
good health.
everyone.
Good meeting.
Bye-bye.
You guys, good night, everybody. Take care.
Night.
Bye. Good night.